What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Forgotten Jesus podcast. My name is Andrew Bolton with Pastor Robbie Gowdy and Candy on our second bonus episode for the Christmas season. Pastor, last week we ended with talking about the shepherds and how the birth of Jesus didn't come to the most highly esteemed people, but it came to the shepherds who in that culturally in that time were detestable, rejected, et cetera, et cetera. Today you're getting into why it is such a lowly position now.
Yeah. Yeah. Any ideas from you guys as to why?
Well, I know, because I'm trying to figure out how it shifted from in David's time being a respectable occupation to now. Like, what would have happened to change that?
But even in David's time, wasn't there some remarks made about him being a shepherd?
Yeah, I said that wrongly last time. It wasn't an acceptable it wasn't an accepted position even in David's time. It was even looked at with a snarky look toward. They looked down on shepherd, because think about Samuel. He's like, "Do you have anybody else?" And Dad's like, "Well, I got this
shepherd boy
messing with the sheep." Because you got to remember, shepherds follow sheep.
Right.
They follow sheep. They don't lead sheep. Sheep don't follow anybody. By the way, you don't lead a sheep.
Really?
No, you got to push a sheep. You got to push sheep. Right, by the way. That's why you ever hear a sheepdog there, he's pushing them. The shepherd doesn't say, "Follow me, boys," and
so
they go.
Am I following Jesus, or is Jesus pushing me?
Well, watch this. The shepherd follows sheep normally, and what comes after sheep?
Sheep poop.
Exactly. So that was not a desirable.
I could have alliterated that, but I didn't.
I'm glad you did not go with
But I did not.
I'm glad you did warn the viewers the listeners last episodes. This is not a family friendly show.
No, it is typically.
Yeah. No. But shepherds. I mean, obviously the shepherds lead the sheep, but normally you're pushing and driving sheep right from behind. So it was looked down upon. So as Candy's right, even in David's day it was looked down upon, but in Jesus's day it was even detested or detestable, and it was despised by people. Why? A couple reasons. A couple bad apples ruined it for everyone. Dwight Pryor, who the late great Dwight Pryor, biblical scholar, a mentor of mine, consider Dwight to be my rabbi in the Jewish culture. Dwight said shepherds were detestable and unreliable. They sometimes couldn't even testify in court. Nobody wanted to be a shepherd. Shepherds were despised by the good, quote, respectable people of the day. According to the Mishnah commentary on the Bible, shepherds were under a ban. They were regarded as thieves. The only people lower than shepherds at that particular time in Jewish history were lepers.
Wow.
Were lepers. Okay. So when the God of heaven comes, he doesn't come to the court of royalty. He doesn't come to the high and lifted up. He doesn't come to the kings and queens. He actually reveals himself to shepherds. Why? Because the shepherds are going to tell us two things about the Messiah. Okay. Why would God do this? He didn't come to the palace. Jesus wasn't born in a court. Jesus wasn't presented with a procession of a parade. He is born in a cave, and the Bible says specifically in a feeding trough inside of an animal stable, if you will. Okay. Now, a little sidebar about feeding trough, and this really messes people. What do you mean he was born in the feeding trough? Yes, they didn't have a place to lay him, and so the feeding trough where they would feed the animals food. They have it there. Why? Because they're in a stable with animals. So they lay Jesus down in this feeding trough, and a feeding trough was also a picture in the Jewish culture of obedience. Did you know this?
I did not.
It signified obedience. Why? Because some animals were stubborn, and they didn't eat when you fed them. We know this personally at our own house.
Are we talking kids or animals?
We're talking, well.
Because mine's kids.
Could be both.
What are we going to have for dinner?
That's actually pretty good, because I think we have one animal, we have one dog that eats their food and the others, and we have one kid that eats their food and will eat anything, and we have one other kid that eats nothing, and we have one animal that eats others. So Annie,
he eats something, but it's just not what he's supposed to eat.
Yeah,
chips and snacks.
Oh,
No, I'm talking about the dog.
Oh, the dog. Chips and snacks, exactly. That's what the pastor's talking about.
Yeah, no. If you don't watch the dog, they will get in the garbage. But the point is, Tubby, the younger one, who's stubborn and hard-headed, but he's my favorite.
Are we talking kids or dogs?
No, we're talking
Dogs.
dogs. Talking
Dogs,
dogs.
okay, let's
Tubby
clarify.
actually does not eat. You put his food, and he comes out because he's waiting for the scraps from the garbage. But Annie will eat her food and his food, okay? So a sign of obedience, which makes perfect sense for our dogs, was when you put food down in a trough,
Right.
you eat. Now, isn't it interesting? We talked about this last week. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, the house of bread. Let me make another connection for you. Isn't it fascinating that Jesus is laid in a feeding trough? Huh. And the feeding trough signifies feasting or sustenance or eating.
Oh, wow.
And the very trough itself shows a sign of obedience.
Oh,
and
good night,
You're going to
yeah.
love this. And what does Jesus come to do? To obey
Right.
his father. And not just once. You ready for this? They say he's lying in a... You're going to love it. I mean, just little nuggets just pop off the page. How many times does it say he's lying in a manger? Do you know? Not once. Not twice. 3 times.
Ooh.
3 times. 3 times. And we know that number 3 is pretty important in the Jewish culture. I'll let you figure out what that means. But the shepherds are going to teach us another principle, okay? You're going to find him lying in a manger, in a feeding trough, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Now, you have to understand, back in that time, certain towns were known for certain things, okay? Nashville, give you a pop quiz. Nashville is known for what?
Music.
Vivian,
Or-
what kind of music? Country
Country.
music.
I was
Vivian.
going to say, or like Bridesmaids.
No, they are known for
Bachelorette
bachelorette
parties.
parties.
That's what I was trying to think of. It's been a
well,
long
they
time
are
since
known for
I've got
bachelorette
married,
parties.
yeah.
Did you know we're the number 1 bachelorette party capital of the world?
I did. Which is why I said that.
Yeah. What is New Orleans, Louisiana, known for?
The French Quarter.
Mardi Gras.
Bourbon Street.
Mardi Gras, Bercy, but food, like Cajun food.
I would not
That's
have
what I was
gone there.
thinking.
Yeah.
I was trying to give
Ooh,
it the
them little
benefit of the-
beignets. Oh, son.
Those
Oh,
are
yeah.
good. Those
The
are
bread
good.
of life.
Yeah.
Those are amazing.
That is sustenance right
Yes.
there, my friend. Okay. What is Maine known for?
Lobster.
Lobster. Okay. What was Bethlehem known for?
Bread.
No.
What?
Well,
Well,
You just said House of Bread.
Well, it was the house of bread,
Baked-
but they didn't
yeah.
really bake a lot of bread. It wasn't like baked bread there. It was just the name of the town.
Okay.
What was Bethlehem known for, though? What was it known for?
I have no clue now.
Olive wood.
She's saying that because that's where we go to.
That's true, though, huh?
We go to Saliba's
Darn it.
wood shop in Bethlehem, and
Yeah.
Vivian's
Olive
been
Garden with breadsticks.
there. Wow, that's where they got it.
That
Olive
is where they
Garden.
got that from.
Yes, House of Bread.
House of Bread.
No.
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem was known for the only place in all of Israel that raised the lambs that were acceptable for sacrifice
No way.
in the temple. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the only place that you could receive a lamb to offer up to God in the temple by the priesthood was Bethlehem.
Wow.
That was it. You couldn't get them from anywhere else, and that's where they got them from. Now, I'll give you some statistics. During the Passover celebration alone, remember there were 3 festivals of celebration, but the Passover was one where everyone had to bring a lamb to sacrifice to the Lord for their family, to remember the Passover, God Passover and saved the nation. Guess how many people they said would come to the Passover celebration during that time? In upwards of, and this is Josephus, and sometimes he exaggerates, but we'll just use his number and I'll parse it out. Guess how many people could have come during the time of Jesus to the Passover for the celebration? Take a guess.
500,000.
That's a good guess.
I'd say 1 million.
That's a better guess. Josephus said anywhere from 2 to 3 million.
Oh, wow.
Okay, 2 to 3 million. Sometimes, so here's a little rule of thumb when you're translating Josephus, who's a historian in the 1st century. They always say whatever Josephus says, divide by 3.
Oh, good night.
Yeah, because he's always exaggerating. But let's just say on the low end, let's say there's a 500,000 to 1 million. Okay, 1 million people.
Okay.
And every person that comes has to bring 1 lamb to sacrifice for their family.
Wow.
Wow.
So that could be on the low end, what, 150,000 to 250,000 sheep to be sacrificed. Josephus said that the blood from Passover ran so deep in the streets that it was like water coming down the different streets of the city with blood. That's how much blood was coming, okay? So you have this Passover celebration. Everybody's required to come. Why would they do that? just a sidebar. God showed the people early on in the Old Testament that life was in the blood. Okay? Life is in the blood. So in order for you to live in the presence of a holy God as a sinful human being, somebody has to die in your place. It started in the Old Testament with Adam and Eve. When they sinned, God killed the first animal in the garden with the animal and provided skin for them to, in a sense, cover their sin. The same thing happened in Exodus with the innocent animal died and the blood covered their sin so they can live. So that's the picture. Why did God set it up this way? I don't know. That's the way he set it up. Why would he do this? It's such a horrific act, and blood and smell and stench and burning animals. Why would he do that? I want you to see this. The more you think about it, the harder it is to fathom. But here's the point. God wants us to know just how much he hates sin.
Wow.
Like if you're not bothered by the fact that an innocent animal that you raise, and we had to do this one time. We had to put down some of our animals when we had sheep. And I just remember how horrific it was that the family animal had to be put down in front of us. If you're not bothered by that, something's wrong with you. And if you are bothered by that, it shows you just how much God hates sin, and it shows you just how deep the sacrifice of Christ was for your sin and my sin. Now, Bethlehem, as I said, was the place where the shepherds raised the flock in order to go to the temple. But there's a place in Bethlehem about 1,000 or 1,500 paces outside of Bethlehem, north toward Jerusalem, called the Migdal Adair. Okay, the Migdal Adair, and it's called the Watchtower of the flock. Okay, go with me, Candy, to Genesis chapter 35, verse 19, and I want to show you why Bethlehem is so significant for the Passover lambs. There's a place in Bethlehem, just north, called the Migdal Adair, the house of the flock, or the watchtower of the flock. It was the place where the shepherds were looking over the landscape at the sheep. So I want to show you the first place that's mentioned in the Bible, Genesis 35:19. So read this quickly.
Okay. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem.
Keep going.
Jacob set up a marker on her grave. It is the marker at Rachel's grave still today.
Keep going.
Israel set out again and pitched his tent beyond the Tower of Adair.
There it is. The Tower of Adair. Adair is the flock. Eder. The Tower of Adair, the flock.
Is it Eder or Adair?
I don't know. It's Adair, one of them. And when you're pronouncing Hebrew words you don't know, what do you do?
Say them with confidence and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, nobody knows. Okay, so it's one of those two. But the Migdal Adair, I think it is the Tower of the flock. Okay, that's the first time you see it. It's where Rachel died and was buried. Now, we're going to see it again in Micah chapter 4, verse 8, which is interesting because Micah chapter 5 is the prophecy of Bethlehem. One chapter before, we're going to see it again. Watch this.
Micah 4:8.
Yep.
Okay. And you, watchtower for the flock, fortified hill of daughter Zion, the former rule will come to you. Sovereignty will come to daughter Jerusalem.
Okay, that's such a good verse. Now watch what Mike is saying. Mike is saying, you, the watchtower of the flock. This is where. So what is the watchtower of the flock? It was this structure, and you can go online, and maybe Robert, we can find a picture. There is a picture if you search Migdal Adair. We'll put it on the show notes. It's a picture of what one would have looked like. It was just this little tower built with bricks and stones, and you would stand in it or on it, and you would watch the flock at night. And then underneath in the open area, this was the place where you diagnosed and investigated to determine if the sheep or lamb was without spot or blemish. It was a big room that you would bring the sheep in. It was also a place, they believe, where the sheep or the sheep or the goats sometimes, or mostly sheep, would have babies. They would give birth inside of this Migdal Adair, and then as soon as the flock, or as soon as the baby was born, the shepherd would immediately grab the lamb immediately, because you got to remember, when a lamb is born, they're kicking and jumping and flipping. And so what they don't want to happen is what is the last thing they need to happen to one of these temple-raised sheep?
To like break
Get
a bone
injured
or something.
To break a bone or a bruise.
Yeah,
or
has
chip
to
an
be
ear
spotless.
or mark a face. That's the way God said it. I mean, seriously.
Chip an ear, you said.
Chip an ear or cut an ear. Cut
Brittle
an ear.
ears.
I don't know. I'm making
like,
things
what
up on
kind
the
of
spot.
chip?
But basically, you don't want this animal to have any blemish. So what did you do? You actually put the feet the arms and the legs. You put them together, and they wrap these lambs. You ready for this? With swaddling cloths.
Oh wow.
Kind of like a swaddling a child.
Right.
Our son Rig and Ryder, both of them had colic, and the only thing that helped them, or actually helped us get through the night from never-ending crying, was swaddling.
Well, I remember we would swaddle our boys so they didn't scratch themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, that's another one.
Which is kind of what we're seeing here.
Basically, for those who don't know, it's basically a prison cell in a swaddling
But they love it. They love it.
Put their arm. Yeah, it actually makes them feel secure and warm and safe. Okay,
right. Jeannie still swaddles me like before I go to sleep.
Babe, can you tuck me in?
Yeah, you mind?
Okay,
a little tighter around the feet, please.
Yeah. So you would swaddle the animal to protect it from hurting itself. Now, it's interesting because the sign the shepherds will come and notice is going to be this swaddling cloth around not a sheep, which is what they expected,
right,
but a baby. Now, here's another little side note. There is a statement about the Migdal Adair that is found in the Targum, which the Targum, for those who don't know, you have the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Targum, the Gemara. These are all basically Old Testament commentaries collected together in the Mishnah, Old Testament commentaries, rabbinic writings, sayings, oral law, all gathered together in one book that the people would know about and use to translate the Old Testament. Okay? So a Targum is a rabbinic note by a rabbi written about a particular passage or an idea. In the Targum, there is a line about the Messiah. Now, here's what's fascinating. This Targum was found when they uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay? Now, which means that it could be as old as 70 AD, but scholars have suggested that this Targum dated back to orally Ezra. In the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, hundreds of years before, they believed this about the Messiah. And here's what the Targum says, okay? Let me read it for you. Migdal Adair, the tower of the flock, the place from which it will happen that King Messiah will be revealed to us at the end of the days.
Wow.
So this is a non-Christian Jewish rabbi or Jewish sage writing about Migdal Adair in Bethlehem, saying that when King Messiah comes, he will come to this place. Isn't it fascinating that when the announcement goes forth, it goes to shepherds, the lowly, detestable ones? Why? Two reasons. One, shepherds couldn't testify. They weren't respected. They were looked down upon. But watch this. God's going to take the lowest of low, the despised, the overlooked, the humiliated, and he's going to entrust the greatest message of the world, the announcement of his son, but he's also going to do it for another reason. Because it was these shepherds, you're going to love this, it was these shepherds who were given the task to determine if the lamb
was perfect.
Wow. They were the final deciding factor as to if this lamb was acceptable to be sacrificed in God's temple. And isn't it interesting? They're the first ones to go see Jesus, and they are blown away. And of course, they say, "Wow, this is an acceptable sacrifice." But there's more. But there's more. The cloth had a dual purpose. Not only was the swaddling cloth a picture of wrapping of lambs prepared for a sacrificial service. So think about this. The cloth is giving us meaning as to Jesus' death. Jesus' sacrifice. Jesus didn't come just to live. Yes, he did. But this Lamb of God, has come to be the sacrifice for the sin of the world.
Wow.
But it's more than that. The cloths that were used were swaddling bands, to be technical. Okay, these bands were about 5 inches wide, as long as 5 to 6 yards long. So they were little strips of bands that they would use,
like you'd picture a mummy.
Like wrapping a mummy, exactly.
Right.
According to the Mishnah, again, commentary in the Old Testament, these bands were used not only to wrap the Passover lambs to protect them from injury, but they were also used to wrap dead bodies in preparation for burial.
Wow.
Now, why is that important? Because in the caves surrounding Israel and Galilee and Bethlehem, travelers would readily stay. You would go on long journeys. You would travel with your family, 3-day journey from Galilee to Jerusalem. it's highly likely that one of your family members would die on the way.
Mm-hmm.
That happened all the time in the Old Testament.
All the time.
Yeah.
You can't airlift to Centennial Hospital.
No.
You call a
Right.
So what do? You have to prepare the body in the moment. And so what they would do as a courtesy is they would regularly have these swaddling cloths interspersed in the caves on shelves, so that when travelers were there, they could use them. Watch this. Arnold Frichtenbaum, Jewish theologian, says this. Very fascinating. Interspersed among the caves were caves that were used for burial purposes. So in these burial caves, inside the niches in the walls, you can still see to this day, they would store burial cloths. If a person died within the town, they would bury the body outside of it, wrap the body in the strips of cloth from the cloth stored in the stable caves, and then they would take him to be buried either in a different cave or a cemetery below the grave or below the ground. Because Jesus was born in a stable cave, Mary and Joseph had to make use of that which was readily available, which was burial cloths.
Wow.
Now, why is that important? On the first day of Jesus's life, this is the picture the shepherds see when they come upon him. Number one is they see Jesus wrapped up like a Passover lamb prepared for sacrifice to the temple, but they also see him wrapped up like a dead body prepared for life after death.
Wow.
And I don't think it's any accident that both of these two images converge on the birth of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
So it's way more than just cloths. It's way more than just shepherds out there. You're starting to see, and I hope you're learning as you're listening to this podcast, the nuggets are in the little details. If the gospel writer puts a note in here, certain kind of cloth, a certain day journey, certain kind of person, it's there for a reason.
For sure. So I'm seeing some parallels here, chiasm, if you will. So born in a cave, placed in a cave.
Kesher,
yeah.
Ooh, I see where you're going. Okay.
Wrapped in cloth.
Ooh.
Revealed himself to shepherds on the front end. Who did he reveal himself on the back end to when he came back?
Disciples.
No.
Women.
Who
I see where you're going here.
were also
They were the first to discover the body.
Exactly. Couldn't testify in court or whatever the case may be. Like
Look
also
at you,
still
dude.
kind of I'm learning.
Keep going.
No, that's all I got. That's all I got.
You had those are some good ones. So you see Jesus' life bookended with these interesting truths.
Yeah. That's wild.
That's good, Andrew.
That's wild. Okay. Is that it for this episode?
Yeah, well, we may have more, but just share this with your friends. There may be people who don't know some of these things, and it can really enhance their Christmas worship time this Christmas of Jesus.
Okay, so cliffhanger, if we get to it on the next episode, how did the wise men get to travel to see Jesus? Do you know?
That, I don't know.
In a Honda.
In a Honda?
Yeah, it says they came in one accord. Okay, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode of the Forgotten Jesus podcast. Share it with your friends and family. Again, connect with us on social media at The Forgotten Jesus on Instagram. We'd love to talk to you there. That's a lot of where we get questions and stuff as well. So, and always check out the show notes for the discussion questions so you guys can break this down as you talk amongst your friends. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.